Guys, the trade deadline is over, and we need to start analyzing how each team actually fared come this trade deadline. So we're going to go over and grade each team's performance based on how we felt they did personally at this trade deadline and the weeks leading up to it. And I'm going to start off with the Anaheim Ducks. And I had to give Anaheim a D because Anaheim really didn't do what I expected them to do, which was get rid of a lot of veterans and try to get a lot of picks back in return. Really, the only player they were able to remove and get anything was John Klingberg, and they really didn't get enough back. They weren't able to secure a first round or second round pick for him, and it just wasn't enough for me.
The next team that we have is the Arizona Coyotes, and we have to give them a C. And the main reason why we had to give them a C is that mainly that Chicken trade. They just didn't get enough for him. I thought with all the speculation, with all the rumors about Jacob Chicken on the package that they wanted, I thought they would get a lot more than what Ottawa gave them. So they did ultimately get a lot of draft picks, but in the end, they didn't get enough.
Next up, I got the Boston Bruins. And for the Boston Bruins, I had to give them an A because as great as this team's already been, they went out and stacked up to the point where this line looks like an all-star team. They went out and added Orlov on the defense, along with Hathaway, who's a really solid, gritty player that they can use on the fourth line and brings a lot of energy to this team. And then they went out and added Todd Bertuzzi, who looks like he's going to be playing on the third line to make this team just absolutely stacked top to bottom.
The next team we have is Buffalo Sabres. Then they get a C. Now, the reason why they get a C is because they added Jordan Greenway, which is, in my opinion, a very good hockey player, a good bottom six player, but that's all they did. This team is overall pretty good. Hopefully, by the looks of it, they have a chance to make the playoffs.
Next up, I have the Calgary Flames, and honestly, for Calgary, I had to give them a D. Really, the only move that they went out and made is trading Ricci Brother for Ricci Brother, and that's not going to change much for this team. This is a team who's on the outside of the playoffs right now, looking in, and it doesn't look like they're going to have what it takes to get done, and they didn't really sell anything off to get picks back in return. They kind of just stood pat.
Yeah, the next team that we have is the Carolina Hurricanes, and they get a C. Now, this team didn't do enough. I think with a contending team like this, we thought that they're going to bring in a top winger on the team or something, which they failed to do. They only added Gosselspier and Jesse Puljujarvi, which in my opinion is not good enough, despite Gosselspier doing really well right now. It's just not enough.
Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. And for the Blackhawks, we gave them a B. They managed to get rid of some of their older assets like Patrick Kane and Max Domi. But really, we thought their returns were pretty decent for them, considering Patrick Kane only gave them one team. Getting a second and a fourth back for him was actually kind of respectable. And then Max Domi got them another second. Overall, not too bad.
And the next team that we have is the Colorado Avalanche, and they get a C grade. Now, this team gets a C because they only really added Lars Eller, which is a decent third-line center, but that's all they did.
Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets. And for Columbus, we gave them a C. They did some things really good. They ended up managing to get Gavrikov off their books and get a first-round pick in return for him, which was nice. But really, other than that, they didn't trade away a lot of their veteran players that they didn't need. They did manage to dump Nyquist, which was something. And they were kind of close to getting a bit of a higher grade. But just overall, it wasn't what we expected for a team that's bottom two in the league right now.
The next team that we have is the Dallas Stars, and I think we all can expect that. We all expected that this team would have done a lot more because they were in rumor for Patrick Kane for such a long time. Unfortunately, all they really did was added Dadonov, which is actually a good player, in exchange for Gurianov. Good trade for them. And they also acquired Max Domi from the Chicago Blackhawks, which is going to bolster their offense, but it's not the type of player that we thought they were going to get.
Next up, the Detroit Red Wings. And for the Red Wings, I had to give them a B. I thought they did really good, managing to trade Hronek and Bertuzzi. And they got some pretty solid returns for both. Stevie Y working his magic again, getting multiple first-round picks. This team was close to an A, but we basically had them at a B because they were just short of some of these other teams that we thought were A caliber.
The Edmonton Oilers will get a B. Now, they went out and added a really good defenseman for this club, and that's Matthias Ekholm, although they overpaid for him. I thought they definitely overpaid a lot of assets for this player. The other acquisition was Nick Bjugstad, which is actually going to be a solid bottom six center for this team. So I think this team gets a B.
Next up, I have the Florida Panthers. And we all know Florida's fighting right now for the playoffs, and they haven't been doing the best at it. This team is getting a D. They really didn't do anything. They didn't manage to really sell off anybody, and they didn't go all in and try to add anyone because they were kind of strapped pick-wise because of last year's run. And just all around, I thought this was a pretty brutal trade deadline for the Florida Panthers.
Next team is the Los Angeles Kings, and they get a B as well. They went out and acquired Gavrikov, a big defenseman on the market in this trade deadline. And they also acquired Corgunas Korpisalo, which is actually a pretty good goalie. Unfortunately, they had to give up a long-time Hall of Famer, Jonathan Quick, for it to do it, but hey.
Next up, the Minnesota Wild. And for the Wild, we gave them a C. Now, they made some positive moves. They went out and added a puck-moving defenseman in John Klingberg, who really adds a lot to that power play because they don't really have too much for offensive defensemen, which we liked, and it didn't cost them that much. Along with Oscar Sundqvist, who is a solid physical player, but they did, however, lose Jordan Greenway, so in the end, we had to give them a C for this.
The Montreal Canadiens will get a D. Now they did almost nothing in this trade deadline, so they get a D.
Fair. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators. And you know what? Just off the fact that they're finally admitting they need to rebuild, I gave this team an A. They got rid of Mattias Ekholm, who had been there for a long, long time, along with Mikael Granlund, and their returns were awesome for these players. In that package with Edmonton, they got a lot back with Tyson Barrie, a bunch of picks, and then more picks for Granlund. It's just all around really good for Nashville, and they needed to do this.
The next team that we have is the New Jersey Devils. Now they get an A. This is a very easy one because they went out and acquired probably one of the biggest trade acquisitions in the market, and that's Timo Meier. Timo Meier is going to help a lot with this team, and they get an A.
Next up, the New York Islanders. And for the Islanders, we gave them a B. Adding Bo Horvat was a tremendous add for a team that does not have a lot of offense. They needed a player like this who can play two-way and a really good goal scorer, and just that alone was enough to get them a B. Pierre Engvald also helped as a nice little depth add for this team as well.
The New York Rangers are next, and they get an A. This is an easy one. They went out and acquired Patrick Kane. They also acquired Vladimir Tarasenko, and they also low-key added a pretty good number 7 defenseman in Mikola. So overall, this team has gotten better, I think, on paper, past the deadline.
Next up, the Ottawa Senators. And wow, Ottawa went out and made one of the most surprising but amazing adds in Jacob Chychrun. And for that alone, we had to give them an A. This is a player who's really going to boost this defense, who has been kind of one of a so-so, like, it's really top-heavy. But now they have a solid top 4 with Zub, Shabbat, and now Sanderson and Chychrun. Really nice thing for Ottawa, and they're making a push for the playoffs.
The next team that we have is the Philadelphia Flyers. And again, they did nothing, so they get a D.
That's fair. They really weren't able to sell a lot, were they?
Nope.
Next up, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And for the Penguins, we had to give them a C. In an Eastern Conference right now that's really, really loaded with teams going all in, and it's like an arms race, Pittsburgh didn't do a lot. They lost Teddy Bluger, which was unfortunate for the bottom 6, and they managed to bring in Mikael Granlund and old buddy Nick Bonino. I don't think this is enough for this team. These are 2 older players, and I just don't see this team making much of a run.
The San Jose Sharks are going to get a C. They just didn't do enough. I feel like they didn't get a strong enough return for the Timo Meier trade, and that's a big reason why they get C. I felt like they could have got a lot more than that, than Fabian Sutherland and the package that they got back for him, so
no, definitely
could have got better.
Yeah. And next up, the Seattle Kraken. Now, Seattle I gave a C. And you know what? This team didn't go out and make any moves, but the reason I gave them a C is this is a team that is a fresh team that just started last year. They have basically a bunch of young kids in their system, and they didn't trade away any of them, which I liked. This is a team that doesn't need to make a lot of moves. They're going to probably be in that last wildcard spot this year, and I think they're probably aware they're going to lose first round to one of the great teams like the Dallas Stars or the Colorado Avalanche. So I think it was good for them to not make any moves and sell the future.
The next team that we have is the St. Louis Blues, and they get a B. Now, they did actually really good in the deadline here. They sold off 2 rental players, technically, in Vladimir Tarasenko and Ryan O'Reilly for first-round picks. They were able to acquire first-round picks on both those players. So for that alone, they get a B. They did really well in the deadline.
Next up, the Tampa Bay Lightning. How they always seem to make a splash at the deadline is amazing to me, and they did it once again. We had to give them a B because they went out and added Tanner Jeannot. It cost them 5 draft picks, which seems insane, but this is the type of player that has been working for them in the past 3 playoffs where they go to the Cup final, and he is going to add a lot to that third line and depth scoring to that team. So I really like this move by Tampa, even if it cost a lot.
The Toronto Maple Leafs will get an A. Now, Kyle Dubas was probably the most busiest GM in the deadline. He went out and acquired Sam Lafferty, Jake McCabe, Ryan O'Reilly. Who else am I missing? They've added a lot of players, and it changes the chemistry of the team. I mean, right now they're trying to find a way, trying to mesh everyone together right now because they have so many new faces. But I think in the long term, I think on paper, this team looks pretty good.
Next up, the Vancouver Canucks. I gave them a B because they actually were pretty active. They got rid of Bo Horvat, which kind of hurt their team a little bit, but they got a pretty good return in Aatu Ratti and Beauvillier, who's looked really good there so far, along with the first that they used to flip to get Philip Hronek. I think this team is doing some decent retooling. I questioned that one trade a little bit, which is why I didn't give them an A, but overall, I like that they're trying to change it and get younger.
The next team that we have is the Vegas Golden Knights, and now they get a B. This team actually didn't go out and did that much during the deadline, but they made an acquisition that I think will help their team a lot, and that's Barbashev. The acquisition of Barbashev, that's gonna right now you can see is paying dividends on the line with Jack Eichel right now. It's looking really, really good, and I feel like this team, that's all they really need to do for now.
Fair. Next up, Washington. Washington went out and made one of the most shocking trades with the Leafs I saw all trade deadline, adding Rasmus Sandin for Gustafsson and their first round pick that they got from Boston. And I thought this was a great trade. They needed to get younger, and Washington is finally starting to retool. So I thought a B grade for this team would be quite fair. They also gave away Orlov and Hathaway, but once again, this team needs to get younger, and they're working on it clearly.
And the final team that we have is the Winnipeg Jets, and they get a C grade because they went out and got Nino Niederreiter, which is a decent player, but I just don't think it's the player that they were really looking for, unfortunately. They also acquired Nemestikov, which is just an okay player, not that good, but yeah, they get a C.
Yeah, so that concludes our video, guys, for our personal thoughts on what every team did at this trade deadline. Please feel free in the comments below to disagree with us if you have a different opinion, because I mean, I bet if we ask everyone, not everyone's even going to be close to the same opinions on these trades. So we look forward to hearing the comments below, and we'll see you in our next video. Take care.
Bye.